And a senior partner at Duff & Phelps was previously involved in the details of Craig White's takeover of the club. A leading insolvency practitioner claims that if true, the allegations should mean Duff & Phelps stand down as administrators or are forcibly removed. In a moment, I'll be talking to Paul Murray, the former Rangers director who led one of the bids to take over Rangers. But first, here's David Allison.
Tonight's BBC Scotland investigation raises questions about alleged potential conflicts of interest for the Rangers administrators Duff & Phelps, reveals new facts about former owner David Murray's actual financial involvement with the club, and makes some surprising revelations about who was paid from Rangers' controversial employee benefit trusts. Over a decade, Rangers and Murray International Holdings both deposited cash in an offshore trust, subsequently split into sub-trusts allocated to individual employees. They could then apply for a loan, which they didn't have to pay back. Neither the company nor the employee paid income tax. The tax authorities claim this amounted to tax evasion and that Rangers could owe up to £75 million. Rangers insist it was a perfectly legitimate loophole until 2010, and one former director says they were advised as such.
We had major accounting firms representing Murray that were retained to represent Murray in dealing with the tax. Now, tax authorities. Again, I think we're entitled to assume that if these accounting firms thought there was no validity to what we were representing, they would have basically said, we're not going to take this case because you guys are totally wrong.
But the scheme wasn't just used to pay players like Barry Ferguson and Stephen Close. BBC Scotland's learned that the former owner, Sir David Murray, benefited to the tune of £6.3 million. Sir David declined to be interviewed but told the BBC, "I personally have never received any payment from any trust which involved contributions coming from Rangers Football Club." Other directors also benefited, including one who now has a role ensuring that the rules of the game are obeyed, including those which state that secret side contracts aren't allowed. The Scottish Premier League is currently investigating the use of side contracts at Rangers, and one person they might be interested in speaking to is the current president of the Scottish Football Association, also based here at Camden. Campbell Ogilvie, while director at Rangers, accepts he received £95,000 in the form of an EBT. Mr Ogilvie told BBC Scotland he wasn't aware of which players received EBTs, and because he'd been advised the scheme was in accordance with the regulations, he didn't raise it with the SFA. BBC Scotland has also learned that far from being cash rich, Sir David Murray borrowed the original £6 million to buy Rangers in 1988, and his parent company, Murray International Holdings, had net debt of £69 million in January 1999. And then embarked on a period of rapid bank-funded expansion, borrowing to acquire assets and properties.
So it became obvious to me that something was going badly wrong in the running of Rangers.
You know, if you don't buy a ticket, you can never win a prize. And what far too many people do is go through their life never taking chances.
The BBC has also learned of allegations of potential conflict of interest involving Rangers administrators. The arrival of the administrators, Duff & Phelps, was meant to bring some stability to Rangers, to offer them some breathing space while they sought a new owner. Prospective buyers have come and gone, and even now there's still no fully signed, sealed and delivered deal sorted out. And now the administrators themselves have been called into question.
This is a difficult day for Rangers, but we'll emerge a fitter and stronger club from this. Thank you very much.
Duff & Phelps were then owner Craig White's personal choice as administrators, and he got his way.
This administration will be carried out under the most rigorous public scrutiny, and it will be conducted to the highest professional standards.
Duff & Phelps took on a legal duty to run the club in the interest of the club's creditors. One of their senior partners, David Greer, had advised Craig White during the negotiations to buy Rangers, and crucial to that was a deal with the football finance firm Ticketus, which provided around £25 million to fund the purchase in return for future season ticket revenue. This email from Gary Withy, then of law firm Collier Bristow, to Craig White and David Greer was sent 2 weeks before the Ticketus deal was concluded. It's about the takeover and Ticketus.
Well, on the face of it, this email seems to suggest that David Greer knew about the Ticketus arrangement And therefore, in those circumstances, given that he was a partner of Duff and Phelps, I'm surprised that that involvement wasn't firstly disclosed and secondly doesn't give rise to the sort of conflict of interest that I would have expected would have precluded Duff and Phelps from accepting the appointments as administrators.
Duff and Phelps are suing Craig White and his lawyers Collier Bristow for £25 million because during a key meeting they failed to disclose the money to buy Rangers came not from White but from Ticketus. But David Greer was at that meeting too.
So this suggests that David Greer was in attendance at the very meeting in relation to which his partners are now taking legal action, which, if true, is one of the starkest conflicts of interest I've ever seen. If the conflict of interest is as it appears to be, then I would expect Duff and Phelps to stand down as administrators or to be replaced forcibly by some other practitioner.
Duff and Phelps have denied any wrongdoing and in a statement tonight said,
"Throughout this process we have acted professionally. For the BBC now to accuse Duff and Phelps of conflicts of interest and unprofessional conduct based on a deep misunderstanding of the true picture is downright irresponsible."
As administrators, Duff and Phelps have a duty to creditors, but tonight there are serious doubts, at least, about their ability to be perceived as being above reproach.
Now, we asked for a representative of Duff and Phelps to join us tonight, but we were told they couldn't do that on legal advice in connection with their court action against Collier Bristow. And in the past hour, the following statement has been issued, firstly by the Joint Administrator, Paul Clark. The allegations made in tonight's programme, he says, against Duff and Phelps are untrue, a distortion of the facts and highly defamatory. Discussions are already underway with our solicitors with a view to bringing legal proceedings against the BBC. David Greer, a partner at Duff and Phelps, has also said, "I categorically deny that at the time of the Craig White takeover of Rangers I had any knowledge that funds from Ticketus were being used to acquire the club. This accusation is wrong, highly defamatory and betrays a lack of understanding of the facts." And there is a link to the full statement on the BBC Scotland News website. I'm joined now by the sports journalist Graham Spiers, but first by Paul Murray, a former director of Rangers and a member of the Blue Knights consortium who were recently deeply involved in bidding to buy the club. Well, Paul Murray, what's your reaction to this?
Well, I think first of all, the programme is actually very sad. I think I just feel a sense of sadness to see the club reduced to a 60-minute programme looking at how it's fallen from very high heights. I think from my point of view, obviously as someone who has tried to be involved in saving the club, my real concern is some of the very serious allegations made against Duff and Phelps this evening, which, you know, I have to say are first of all very serious. They seem to be backed up by documentary evidence, and I believe that there's other documentation which the BBC have which points to other issues. So I really feel that this matter has to be investigated as a matter of urgency by the regulatory bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I should say, as we've just said there, Duff and Phelps deny all this. When you say the regulatory bodies, who do you have in mind?
Well, Duff and Phelps obviously are a licensed insolvency practitioner and will be governed by the Insolvency Association, I guess. And I think whoever regulates insolvency practitioners, I think it has to look at this as a matter of urgency. I think the problem from the club's point of view is that we don't have a lot of time to do that. So I think that has to be done as a matter of urgency. I mean, clearly there's allegations of professional misconduct. There's allegations of a conflict of interest. I think those have to be investigated. I think for the Rangers fans to have confidence in the process over the last 3 months, that has to be looked at immediately.
Where does this leave you and your consortium? And would you consider, as the Blue Knights, as they were called, taking any action over any of this?
I don't think there's any action that I want to take. I mean, first and foremost, I want to see the club saved, and obviously I want to see the club in safe hands. I've always said that this isn't about me. You know, I'm first and foremost a supporter of the club. Obviously, I'm a former director. I've had an interest in buying the club with others, but first and foremost, I want to see the club in safe hands. So, you know, a process has been gone through over the last 3 months. I have to say that tonight's programme, if substantiated, you know, to me, suggests a lot of question marks over that process over the last 3 months. Now that process has been gone through. It's taken a long time, and I think a lot of people have questioned why it's taken a long time. But the administrators, in their wisdom, have chosen a preferred bidder in the shape of Charles Green. And the last thing I want to do is obviously do anything that's going to adversely impact the club. But I think there's some serious questions the Rangers fans will want answered. I mean, I thought one of the most interesting contributions tonight was the chap Sammy, who was the Rangers supporter, who clearly had been a lifelong supporter, and I think he raised a lot of questions. I mean, I think one of the issues here is that this is quite a complex, financial and business story, and it's quite hard, I think, to really follow a lot of the nuances and a lot of the detail.
What is the status of your... I mean, you withdrew your bid. There is this, as you say, the Charles Green Consortium has preferred bidder status. You were clearly unhappy when that happened, weren't you? Why were you so unhappy?
Well, I think we just feel... I mean, I think what I'd say is I think... I'll answer that question in a second, but I would actually rather kind of pose some questions this evening. I think that there's a number of, fundamental questions that Duff and Phelps, I think, have to answer. I think we've been 3 months into this process, and I now think that these answers, let's have no more spin, no more media briefings. Let's have some clear answers. What do you mean
by spin?
Well, I think the whole process has been governed in a bit of a circus. I think there's been a lot of media coverage, which it's a very high-profile story. I understand that, but I don't think the substantial issues have been dealt with.
Right, but I mean, are you suggesting, in some sense, they were wrong to not make your consortium the favoured bidder and to go for the other party instead?
No, I mean, I think that's a process they went through, and obviously they're the ones that made that decision.
Because what they said at the time was that they said that their understanding was that your consortium, that you had disagreements amongst yourselves about how to go about funding this. Is that true?
Well, we would disagree with that. We said that 2 weeks ago at the press conference we held to withdraw from the process. I think we made a position very clear. And I said at the time, and I still stand by it, I think the best outcome for the club is a CVA. And we felt that was the last possible time to effect a CVA. But,
you are clearly familiar, because you've been involved in doing, presumably, due diligence on the possibility of bidding for Rangers, with what the state of affairs is now. If your suggestion of some sort of regulatory investigation into the allegations made tonight goes ahead, even if it doesn't, how long can Rangers stay functioning, in your view, as a club in administration? I mean, for example, the pay cuts all run out at the beginning of next month, don't they? Does there have to come a point where the club goes into liquidation, or what?
Well, I think Duff and Phelps have been quite clear. They've said on the record that the club will run out of money at the end of this month.
And you would expect it to go into liquidation unless the Charles Green Consortium bid is agreed?
Yeah, I think that's that's the implication. And obviously, it would appear that they want to try and effect a CVA. There's been some suggestion that document will be sent out this week. There's a creditors meeting, I think, scheduled for the 6th of June or the 10th of June. But, and obviously one of the things that we were being asked to do, and one of the things we were prepared to do, was we were prepared to fund the club in the months until it came out of a CVA, which would be sometime in July, because there has to be a 28-day cooling-off period to let the creditors vote on it.
Would your view be that whatever happens now, and should you, presumably, should circumstances change, you would be prepared to get involved again, but you seem to be suggesting that the prospect of a CVA had now gone, because you couldn't do it in time to get the club up and running for next season?
That's what we felt at the time, and obviously Charles Green has said that he's trying to do that, and obviously we await that documentation. But I think tonight, I mean, I think we made our position clear at the time, and the administrators chose Charles Green, and that's their prerogative. And I think what I'm now saying tonight is, first of all, I think there's some pretty serious allegations here that have to be investigated as a matter of absolute urgency. The club doesn't have time. Now, whether that's possible, I don't know, but that has to get done.
Well, you mentioned whoever regulates insolvency agents. Remember, and we didn't really touch on this, there were also allegations in the documentary that there was a system of dual contracts being run previously at Rangers. Now, that would appear on the face of it to be in breach, allegedly, of SFA rules. Now, presumably there would have to be some investigation, in your view, into that.
Yeah, I think that is a matter of record. That's a separate investigation being done Well, first of all, obviously by the tax authorities and also by the SFA. So I think that's all been dealt with at the moment. So and we await the outcome of that. But I think, you know, what I wanted to say beyond the regulatory thing, you know, I think, you know, obviously I've been involved in this process for 3 months, and you know, certain elements of the process have bemused me, and I think bemused a lot of people. A lot of supporters have been questioning what's been going on. I think a lot of journalists have been asking the same questions, and I think it's now time to actually come out and answer a few fundamental questions.
Which are, just run briefly over what you think
Well,
they
I think
are.
first of all, you know, I think you have to ask, you know, why were Duff and Phelps appointed in the first place? I mean, this is a hugely complicated and high-profile administration. You know, I am a qualified chartered accountant, and I find some of the stuff quite difficult to get my mind around. And I'm also a former director, so I've got quite a lot of inside knowledge of the situation. But, you know, I actually wonder why one of the big 4 accountancy firms wasn't appointed to conduct this. That's the first question. You know, secondly, why was Craig White so desperate to get Duff and Phelps appointed as administrators? You know, when I've had a number of people within Rangers at a very senior level say to me that they only ever saw Craig White panic on one occasion, and that was an occasion that he thought HMRC were going to appoint someone different from Duff and Phelps. So, you know, I start to wonder about that as well. You know, I think Duff and Phelps have to answer definitively what is David Greer's involvement in all of this. David Greer has been involved in this transaction for quite a long time. Come out and tell us exactly what his involvement is.
What about your own involvement? You were a director of Rangers from 2007 until after Craig White took over the club. Did it never occur to you that something funny was going on?
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, I guess if you're referring to the EBT situation, I can answer that question separately. But in terms of my position on the board, I was a non-executive director of Rangers, so, you know, obviously that's...
I mean, one of the allegations was that some of the directors actually got loans from these...
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a matter of record, and obviously you can see tonight's programme. I did not financially benefit from any of this.
So you
know, secondly, the board relied on 2 very important bits of advice. You know, firstly, Grant Thornton audited accounts every year, and it was a matter of public record that the club had EBT schemes, so that was in the accounts for 10 years. Secondly, you know, the club relied on the Murray Group, who administers the scheme, to provide tax and legal advice, and we paid a hefty price, a hefty fee to have that advice. So, you know, I think the board acted in a proper fashion. And I think, secondly, what I'd say is that from my position on the board, you know, I think it's a matter, again, of public record that the debt in the club came down from £35 million to £14 million.
All right, Paul Murray, thanks very much. Graham Spiers, what do you make of all this?
I think the programme tonight was fairly damning in 2 ways. I thought it put impressive flesh on the EBT's scheme run by Rangers. And I said scheme there, not scam. I think that was quite damning for Rangers. And secondly, I know where Paul's coming from. I think for some months now we've been concerned about the role of David Greer, and I think the programme tonight means there will now be a cloud of suspicion hanging over Duff and Phelps for what seems to be a very odd conflict of interest. And if they cannot clarify this and explain clearly why David Greer was in on the start of the Ticketus deal, and then Duff and Phelps, 2 months later, his own company were trying to legally get it breached, it seems very odd, very suspicious.
And what's your view about what happens next? I mean, where are we with... I'll ask you this question, because you're an independent observer. Where are we with this Charles Green consortium?
We're ploughing ahead blindly in the dark with the Charles Green consortium. We're presuming... We can presume nothing about this story now after farce, but we're presuming he can get money together. But there is some doubt about who's in the consortium. There's some doubt about his methods. There are already stories of people not wanting to be a part of the consortium. So if you're asking me to shed light on where Rangers will be in 2 months' time, I can't do that, and I don't think anyone can. How
about shedding some light on where they'll be in a week or two's time?
Well,
because at the beginning of June, the deal with the players runs out, doesn't it? Now, I don't quite know. Does that mean some of the players can leave, or leave on reduced fees, or what?
Rangers are running out of money. They need a cash injection. The players' contracts are up. If they want to renew players' contracts, I think they've got a 2-week period to do it, I think. Yeah. So there's a time scale there. After that, they will need... we've then got the SPL investigation coming up. The SPL's knees are knocking because they want Rangers in the SPL. And we know why, because they need them economically. The SPL want to have their cake and eat it. They want to give Rangers a right good kicking for wrongdoing, and punish them, but my goodness, they want them in the SPL. So it's a very confusing scenario.
All right. With that confusion, we'll have to leave it there for the moment.